You are born into nakedness, not the comfortable kind, not the temporary vulnerability of a moment before dressing, but into a world where your skin is your only protection against everything that wants to harm you. The sun burns without mercy, turning skin red and blistered. The wind cuts like 1,000 tiny blades, especially when winter comes and temperatures drop. Thorns tear at flesh as you move through vegetation. Insects bite and burrow and spread disease. Cold seeps into your bones when darkness falls and stays there, making you shiver uncontrollably through long nights. And you, soft and furless unlike so many other creatures, stand exposed in a world that does not care whether you survive. Your ancestors wrapped themselves in the skins of animals they killed, heavy and stiff and smelling of death and decay. They wore what they could scavenge, what they could take from creatures stronger and better equipped for this world. Fur and hide, leather crudely processed, gut and sinew stitched together with bone needles. But it was never enough, never truly comfortable, never soft against skin. The hides were heavy, weighing you down. They were stiff, restricting movement. They trapped sweat and bred odors. They rotted in rain and cracked in sun. And they required death, constant death, hunting and killing to stay covered. You shiver through nights wrapped in skins that never quite warm you. You sweat through days in furs that suffocate. And you dream, though you do not yet have words for it, of something better. Something that might wrap around you like a second skin, gentle and kind. Something that breathes when you breathe, that moves when you move, that protects without imprisoning. Something that does not require you to take a life to cover your own. And then one day, in a place where water flows and sun lingers warm and generous, you see it, growing wild among the grasses and shrubs, a plant unlike the others around it. Its leaves are broad and green, ordinary enough, nothing to distinguish them from countless other plants. But from its seed pods, from the bowls that split open in the warmth, bursts something extraordinary. Something that stops you in your tracks and makes you reach out with trembling fingers. White, pure white, soft beyond anything you have touched before. Light as breath itself, as if clouds had fallen to earth and caught on branches. Fiber that clings to your fingers when you touch it tentatively, that seems almost alive, almost eager to be gathered, to be used. You pull it free from the open bowl, watching it billow in your palm like captured wind, like something between solid and spirit. And you wonder, in that wordless way of early wondering, in images and feelings rather than articulated thought, what this might become. Cotton, though you do not call it that yet, though it has no name in any language you speak, no word to capture its essence. Just a plant growing at the edge of your known world, patient and persistent, waiting through countless seasons for you to finally notice what it has been offering all along. Waiting for the moment when human hands and plant fiber would meet and change everything. The fiber feels different from anything you have touched before in your life. Not like animal hide, stiff and resistant even after days of scraping and processing. Not like bark or grass, rough and scratching, leaving your skin irritated and marked, but soft, genuinely, remarkably soft. When you rub it between your fingers, exploring its texture with growing wonder, it does not hurt. It does not tear easily despite its delicate appearance. It holds together as if the individual fibers want to cling to each other, to form something larger than themselves, something with purpose and strength. You gather more, moving from plant to plant, pulling the white tufts from their protective bowls with increasing confidence. Your hands fill with impossible lightness, with fiber that weighs almost nothing but fills your palms with abundance. And as you gather, as the pile of white cotton grows beside you, an idea forms. Slowly, tentatively, like dawn breaking over mountains, gradual but inevitable. The beginning of a revolution you cannot possibly foresee, cannot imagine in scope or consequence. What if this could be made into something? What if these fibers, so willing to cling together, could be joined deliberately, twisted with intention, woven into structure? What if this soft cloud substance could become protection, warmth, covering for your vulnerable human body? You have made thread before in your life and in the lives of your ancestors. You know the craft, passed down through generations. Thread from animal sinew, tough and strong but never comfortable against skin. Thread from plant fibers stripped painstakingly from bark and reeds, useful for binding and weaving baskets but rough, always rough. You understand, in your hands if not consciously in your mind, the fundamental principle of twisting. How separate strands, too weak individually to be useful, become strong together when twisted and combined. How they can be spun into cord, braided into rope, woven into fabric for bags and mats and shelters. But you have never worked with anything like this. Never touched fiber this fine, this soft, this willing to cooperate with your intentions. So you try. You take a handful of cotton, feeling its lightness, and begin to twist it between your palms the way you learned with coarser fibers. Rolling and twisting, adding pressure, trying to convince the fibers to hold together. First, it fails completely. The cotton is too short, individual fibers barely longer than your thumb. Too fine, thinner than any fiber you have worked with. Too prone to simply falling apart, drifting away like the cloud it resembles. Your first attempts scatter on the wind, frustrating and seemingly impossible. But you persist, because persistence is what humans do, what has always separated you from other creatures. You learn to tease the fibers first, pulling them gently to align them in the same direction. You learn to draft them out slowly, pulling just a few at a time to add to your growing thread. You learn to add twists slowly and carefully, not rushing, letting the fibers wrap around each other at their own pace. And gradually, miraculously, they hold. They form a thread, thin and irregular and imperfect, nothing like the smooth sinew you are used to, but undeniably thread. And when you have thread, you know from long experience you can make anything. The first attempts at cloth are crude, almost laughably primitive. You knot the cotton threads together in a loose mesh, creating something that barely holds its shape, that has more holes than substance. You try weaving it on simple frames made from sticks, passing threads over and under in the ancient pattern known to every culture that has ever made fabric. The result is rough, full of gaps and irregularities, nothing like the smooth leather or dense fur you are used to wearing. But it is lighter, remarkably, impossibly lighter, and when you hold it up to the sun, light passes through it in a way that makes you catch your breath with wonder. There is something beautiful here, something with potential you are only beginning to grasp, only starting to understand. Seasons pass, marked by the turning of stars and the cycling of rains. You return to the cotton plants again and again, becoming familiar with their rhythm and requirements. They flower in colors that shift gradually from cream to yellow to pink, delicate blooms that seem too beautiful for such practical purpose. The flowers transform into bowls, hard green capsules that protect the developing fiber inside, keeping it safe from weather and insects. You learn to wait for the right moment, developing patience through observation, knowing that harvesting too early yields fiber still damp and undeveloped. When the bowls split open naturally and the cotton bursts forth white and dry, ready for harvest, that is when you gather. Not before. You learn which individual plants produce the longest fibers, the strongest, the whitest, and most lustrous. You learn which grow most vigorously, which resist pests better, which yield the most bowls per plant. And you save their seeds deliberately, carefully, planting them near your settlement with intention. You clear space for them, give them good soil, water them during dry spells. You are beginning the long, slow process of domestication, of transforming a wild plant into a cultivated crop, shaping it to your needs while it simultaneously shapes you, binds you to place, changes what is possible in your life. Because cotton, you are discovering, like grain before it, will not remain wild. Not if you have your way. Not if you see clearly what it might become with patient cultivation and selection. Not if you understand that this plant, more than almost any other, has the capacity to transform human civilization. The work is endless, more demanding than you initially imagined. Each cotton boll must be picked by hand when it opens. No way to rush or shortcut the process. The fibers must be carefully separated from the sticky seeds that cling to them with stubborn determination, as if reluctant to release their precious cargo. Your fingers grow sore from the constant pulling, the picking, the repetitive motion repeated thousands of times. The seeds are covered in tiny fibers called linters, short fuzz that clings stubbornly, each one needing to be removed if you want clean cotton suitable for spinning into fine thread. It takes hours to clean enough cotton to make a single garment, days of patient work, weeks if you want something large, something substantial. Your hands develop calluses in new places. Your back aches from bending over the work. Your eyes strain from focusing on tiny fibers hour after hour. But the result, when you finally hold it in your hands, when you finally wrap the finished cloth around your body, is worth every moment of labor, every ache, every frustration. You spin the cotton into thread using a simple spindle, a weighted stick that hangs suspended and rotates, adding twist as gravity pulls it downward. The motion becomes meditative, almost hypnotic in its repetition. Drop the spindle, watching it fall and spin. Watch the twist travel up into the fiber, binding it together. Wind the completed thread onto the spindle shaft. Drop again. Spin again. Wind again. Your hands learn the rhythm without conscious thought, developing muscle memory, your fingers understanding instinctively how much fiber to feed into the twist, how much tension to maintain, when to wind up the growing thread before dropping again. And slowly, hour by hour, day by day, week by week, you accumulate thread. Precious thread, the product of so much labor it becomes valuable beyond measure. The foundation of everything that will follow in cotton's long history. And then you weave, using a loom as simple as cross sticks propped against a wall or as complex as a frame carefully weighted with stones for tension. You pass threads over and under in the eternal pattern, building fabric from nothing but fiber and patience and skill. The cloth that emerges slowly, growing inch by inch, is unlike anything your people have known before in their history. It is light enough to wear in summer heat without suffocating, without trapping sweat against skin until you feel like drowning. Soft enough to touch bare skin without irritation, without the scratching and chafing of rougher materials. Strong enough, when woven tight and true, to last for years of wear and washing. And it can be washed, something animal skins never tolerate well, cleaned in water and dried in sun, emerging fresh and renewed and ready to wear again. You make a simple tunic, the first cotton garment your people have ever seen. Just a basic shape, nothing fancy, holes for head and arms and nothing more. When you put it on for the first time, pulling it over your head and feeling it settle against your skin, something shifts inside you. Something fundamental changes in how you understand yourself and your place in the world. This is not the skin of an animal you killed. This is not something taken violently from another creature's body, something that required death and blood. This is made, created, grown from a plant you cultivated and transformed by your own hands into something that never existed before in the world. You are wearing your own labor made visible, your own ingenuity given form, your own patience transformed into protection. And it feels like freedom, like possibility, like the future arriving ahead of schedule. Others see what you have made, and of course they want it. How could they not? Who would not choose soft cotton over stiff hide? Given the choice, who would not prefer fabric that breathes in summer heat, that moves with your body over the suffocating weight of fur? Who would not want something that can be washed clean rather than something that accumulates smells and stains permanently? The cotton garment becomes precious immediately, valued beyond its practical function, desired with an intensity that surprises you. And desire creates demand. Demand creates production. Production creates specialization. And specialization creates the foundations of civilization, the complex interdependent societies that will eventually span continents. Because cotton cannot be produced casually, as a side activity while doing something else. It requires dedication, focus, time devoted specifically to its cultivation and processing. The plants must be grown deliberately, given good soil rich in nutrients and water in appropriate amounts and protection from the many pests that want to devour them. The harvest must be timed precisely, picked at the peak moment when the bolls open fully but before weather can damage the exposed fiber, before rain can mat it or wind can scatter it. The cleaning, the carding to align fibers, the spinning, the weaving, each step requires skill developed over years and time measured in hundreds of hours. No one person can do it all and still feed themselves, still care for their family, still participate in the hunt or the grain harvest or the other activities necessary for survival. So you begin to trade, hesitantly at first but with growing confidence. You trade your cotton cloth for food grown by others, for tools made by skilled craftspeople, for protection provided by strong warriors. Others begin to specialize in different aspects of cotton production, each focusing on what they do best. Some grow it, becoming expert at cultivation, learning the secrets of soil and water and timing. Some clean and card it, developing tools and techniques to process the fiber more efficiently, to remove seeds more quickly, to align fibers more perfectly. Some spin, their hands becoming so skilled through endless practice that they can create thread of incredible fineness and strength, thread that almost seems impossible. Some weave, building better looms year by year, discovering new patterns, pushing the boundaries of what fabric can be and do. Cotton economy emerges, not immediately, not through any conscious plan or decision, but inevitably, naturally, as the logic of specialization and trade unfolds. Where cotton grows well, settlements form and grow. Where settlements form, trade networks develop to connect them. Where trade networks develop, cities rise at the intersections, at the hubs where goods flow and accumulate. And cities need organization, need rules and systems, need ways to manage the flow of cotton from field to body, from plant to garment. You are building something larger than you realize, standing in your field or sitting at your loom. Something that will eventually span continents and reshape the world. Something that will clothe billions and enslave millions. Something beautiful and terrible in equal measure. But first, the cotton itself must improve, must evolve beyond its wild form. The wild cotton, generous as it is with its soft fiber, has significant limitations. Its fibers are relatively short, difficult to spin into fine thread without breaking. Its bolls are small, yielding little per plant, requiring vast numbers of plants to produce any substantial quantity of fiber. Its seeds cling stubbornly to the fiber, making the separation process brutally labor-intensive and time-consuming. So you select, practicing the same patient breeding that transformed wild grasses into cultivated grain. Generation after generation, you save seeds from the best plants. The ones with the longest fibers, the ones with the largest bolls, fat and heavy with cotton, the ones whose seeds release more easily, making processing less painful, the ones that resist pests better or grow more vigorously or produce whiter fiber. You are doing to cotton what was done to grain millennia before, domesticating it, reshaping it, making it serve human needs more effectively. And cotton responds, cannot do otherwise. The plants that meet your criteria reproduce. The ones that do not are not saved, do not pass on their characteristics. Over centuries, the plants change visibly, dramatically. Fibers lengthen, first incrementally and then substantially. Bolls swell, becoming larger and more productive. Yields increase, sometimes doubling or tripling compared to wild varieties. Different varieties emerge naturally and through deliberate breeding, suited to different climates and soils and purposes. Upland cotton for higher elevations where temperatures are cooler. Sea island cotton for coastal areas, with fibers so long and fine they can be spun into thread almost like silk, almost impossibly delicate. The plant is becoming what you need it to be, and you are becoming dependent on what it provides, your life and culture increasingly shaped by this relationship. The dependency goes both ways, intimate and inescapable. Cotton, in its domesticated form, cannot survive without human intervention. It has lost, through generations of selection, the ability to spread its seeds effectively on its own, to compete successfully with wild plants, to resist pests without human protection. You have made it soft, productive, valuable, generous with its fiber. And in doing so, you have made it helpless, utterly dependent on human care. It needs your care as much as you need its fiber now. The relationship is symbiotic, intimate, each species reshaping the other in an endless dance of coevolution. You are no longer separate from cotton. You are bound together, your fates intertwined, your futures inseparable. And as cotton improves through selection and cultivation, its uses expand beyond anyone's initial imaginings. You learn to dye it, experimenting with plants and minerals and techniques until you can create colors that do not fade with washing or sun exposure. Deep blues from indigo, a plant almost as demanding as cotton itself. rich reds from madder root, requiring complex processing, bright yellows from turmeric and saffron, purples from certain shellfish so expensive only the wealthy can afford them. Each color has its own technique, its own secrets, its own specialists who guard their knowledge jealously. You learn to print patterns onto the fabric using carved wooden blocks dipped in dye, creating designs of incredible complexity and beauty. Geometric patterns that seem to shift and move. Floral designs that capture the essence of gardens. Abstract forms that speak to something deeper than representation. The printed cloth becomes art, not merely functional but beautiful, something to treasure and display. You learn to weave different weights of cloth, discovering that tension and thread thickness and weaving pattern determine the character of the finished fabric. Gauzy muslins so fine they are nearly transparent, so light they float on the slightest breeze, so delicate they seem impossible. Heavy canvas strong enough to make tents that withstand storms and sails that catch wind and propel ships across oceans. Everything in between, each weight suited to particular purposes, each with its own name and value. Cotton becomes more than clothing. It becomes art, culture, identity, meaning. Different regions develop their own distinctive weaving patterns, their own secret dyeing techniques, their own signature styles recognizable to anyone familiar with textiles. You can tell where someone is from by looking at the pattern of their cotton cloth, the colors they favor, the way they drape and tie and wrap the fabric around their bodies. Cotton becomes a language, a way of saying without words who you are, where you belong, what you value, what you believe. It becomes a marker of status too, inevitable as inequality develops. The finest cotton, the most intricate patterns, the rarest dyes, these belong to the wealthy, to the powerful, to those who can afford the labor of master weavers and dyers. Coarser cotton, plain and undyed or poorly dyed, marks the lower classes. You can read social hierarchy in fabric, in the quality and decoration of what people wear, and the labor it requires, the endless human effort, becomes central to cotton's story. Backbreaking, finger cramping, eye straining, soul-crushing labor. Because cotton, for all its advantages over animal hide, for all its softness and comfort, is demanding of human time and effort. Each step in its transformation from plant to cloth requires human effort that cannot be eliminated, human time that cannot be shortened beyond certain limits, human skill that cannot be faked or rushed. There are no real shortcuts, no easy paths from seed to shirt. The work must be done, hour after hour, day after day, year after year, generation after generation. And as demand grows, as more and more people want cotton clothing, as trade networks expand and cotton becomes a valuable commodity traded across vast distances, the need for labor becomes desperate, urgent, seemingly insatiable. This is where the dark side of cotton emerges fully, where the soft white fiber reveals its capacity for cruelty and oppression, where the plant that promised comfort delivers suffering instead to millions. Because someone must do the work. Someone must bend over the plants in burning sun that makes vision blur and skin burn, picking until fingers bleed from the sharp bowls and broken skin. Someone must spend endless hours cleaning seeds from fiber, a task so tedious, so mind-numbingly repetitive it breaks the spirit even as it exhausts the body. Someone must spin endless thread, winding and twisting until hands cramp into claws. Someone must weave endless cloth, passing the shuttle back and forth thousands of times per yard. Someone must dye and print and finish endless yards of fabric. And when the demand exceeds what free labor can provide, when profit becomes more important than people, when economic logic overrides moral consideration, slavery enters the cotton fields. Not everywhere, not immediately, not all at once, but inevitably, terribly, with consequences that echo through centuries. The logic is brutal and simple, reducible to cruel mathematics. Cotton is valuable in markets near and far. Labor is expensive when you must pay wages. Enslaved labor costs nothing beyond initial purchase and minimal maintenance. Force people to work without pay and keep all the profit for yourself. The mathematics of oppression, written in cotton fiber, calculated in human suffering, justified by greed disguised as economic necessity. The fields spread across warm climates, across continents, following cotton's requirements for heat and water. In India, cotton cultivation employs millions of people, shapes entire regional economies, becomes woven into the spiritual and cultural fabric of civilization itself. Cotton appears in sacred texts, in mythology, in art and literature. The spinning wheel becomes a symbol of self-sufficiency, of dignity in labor, of resistance to oppression. In Egypt, cotton grows along the Nile, watered by floods that bring both water and nutrients, transformed into fabric so fine the Greeks call it woven wind, so delicate and beautiful it seems almost magical. Egyptian cotton becomes legendary for its quality, its long fibers and lustrous appearance. In the Americas, after European contact and colonization, cotton plantations spread like disease, worked by enslaved Africans torn from their homes through violence, their labor stolen, their lives destroyed to feed the insatiable appetite for cheap cloth in European markets. Millions are enslaved. Millions suffer. Millions die. All for cotton. All to clothe Europe and later America in affordable fabric. The cotton gin, when Eli Whitney finally invents it in 1793, changes everything and nothing simultaneously. It can clean cotton 50 times faster than human hands, removing seeds with mechanical efficiency that seems miraculous. It should free people from the most tedious labor, from the mind-numbing work of seed removal. Instead, it makes cotton far more profitable, which increases demand, which increases the acreage planted, which increases the need for enslaved labor to plant and pick and process ever-growing quantities. Technology does not liberate. It intensifies exploitation. The gin makes fortunes for plantation owners and textile manufacturers while enslaved people continue to suffer in fields that stretch to the horizon. Their numbers growing rather than shrinking, their conditions worsening rather than improving. More cotton means more slavery, not less. More profit means more suffering, not less. Cotton becomes the fabric of the Industrial Revolution, literally and metaphorically. The textile mills of England, first powered by water wheels and then by steam engines, transform cotton production from a craft practiced by skilled individuals into an industry employing thousands in massive factories. Machines spin thread faster than 1,000 skilled hands working simultaneously. Power looms weave cloth at speeds that would have seemed impossible, literally unimaginable, to earlier generations. The machines are marvels of engineering, complex systems of gears and pulleys and flying shuttles, products of human ingenuity at its finest. And they are monstrous, consuming human lives almost as efficiently as they consume raw cotton. The mill workers, many of them children as young as 6 or 7, work 12-hour shifts or longer in conditions that destroy health and break spirits. The noise is deafening, making conversation impossible, damaging hearing permanently. The air is thick with cotton dust that destroys lungs, causing brown lung disease that suffocates slowly over years. Workers lose fingers to the machines, suffer crushed limbs, endure poverty wages barely sufficient to survive, face brutal discipline and dangerous conditions. The cotton cloth they produce enriches factory owners, while the workers themselves can barely afford to buy the fabric they make. The Industrial Revolution built on cotton is also built on suffering, on exploitation, on the grinding of human bodies into profit margins, on the sacrifice of worker health and happiness for owner wealth. The system works magnificently if you measure success by production volume and profit. It works terribly if you measure by human welfare. And yet, paradoxically, cotton cloth becomes cheaper and more abundant than ever before in history. What was once precious becomes common. What was once luxury becomes everyday. Cotton clothing spreads across the globe, across all social classes, across cultures. The poor can afford multiple changes of clothes, something unthinkable in earlier eras. The working class can dress in clean, comfortable fabric rather than stiff, smelly hide. Cotton underwear, cotton sheets, cotton towels become standard rather than rare luxuries. The democratization of comfort happens, and it happens through cotton, through industrial production, through global trade networks. But the cost, the human cost, remains staggering beyond comprehension. The enslaved people in American cotton fields, millions of them across generations, their suffering unimaginable to those who have never experienced bondage. Families torn apart, bodies broken by labor, spirits crushed by hopelessness, lives stolen to grow a plant. The colonized peoples of India, their traditional cotton industry deliberately destroyed by British imperial policy, forced to buy back-manufactured cloth made from cotton they themselves grew. Their economy reshaped to serve British interests rather than their own needs. The mill workers of Manchester and Lowell and countless other industrial cities, their health destroyed by cotton dust and dangerous machines, their lives shortened by exhausting labor and poverty wages, their labor exploited to create wealth they will never share. Cotton clothed the world, but it did so through systems of oppression and exploitation that still echo today, still shape economies and societies, still cause suffering. The American Civil War is, in many fundamental ways, a cotton war. The Southern economy depends almost entirely on cotton production, which depends entirely on slavery. Cotton is king in the South, more valuable than any other crop, the foundation of wealth and power. The North's textile mills depend on Southern cotton for raw material, but Northern society increasingly finds slavery morally intolerable, economically inefficient, and politically unacceptable. The conflict between economic dependency and moral conviction tears the nation apart violently. More than 600,000 people die in a war that is fundamentally about many things, but cotton and slavery are woven through every cause, every battle, every consequence. When slavery finally ends in America after the war, cotton production does not stop or even slow significantly. It adapts to new conditions. Sharecropping replaces slavery almost immediately, a system that is almost as exploitative in practice, if not in law, keeping former slaves and poor whites trapped in cycles of debt and poverty that can never be escaped. They are still working the same fields, still producing cotton for markets they will never fully benefit from, still poor and powerless. The system changes its legal form but retains its essential cruelty and exploitation. Cotton continues to exact its price in human suffering, continues to be built on the backs of the poor and powerless. And cotton spreads further, carried by colonialism and trade and the endless demand for fiber. To Central Asia, where Soviet planters will eventually drain entire seas to irrigate cotton fields, creating environmental disasters of staggering scale. To Africa, where colonial powers force farmers to grow cotton for export rather than food for themselves, creating famines and dependence. To every warm climate where soil and water exist, cotton is planted, cultivated, harvested, and exported to feed the mills of the world. It becomes one of the most important agricultural commodities in the world, a crop that shapes national economies, drives international trade, influences politics, starts wars, creates wealth and poverty simultaneously. The cotton plant, that soft white fiber you first gathered by hand all those millennia ago, has become an empire, a global industry, a force that shapes the lives of hundreds of millions of people, from the farmers who grow it to the workers who process it to the consumers who wear it without thought. Most people who wear cotton today have never seen a cotton plant growing, never touched raw fiber, never understood the complex journey from seed to shirt. The system has become so vast, so complex, so global and interconnected that it is effectively invisible to those it serves. You buy a cotton t-shirt at a store without knowing or thinking about where the cotton was grown. Probably several countries, the supply chain too complex to trace fully, too fragmented to understand. You do not know who picked it, under what conditions, for what wages. You do not know who spun the thread, who wove the cloth, who cut and sewed the garment. The entire process is hidden behind price and brand and style. The cotton economy today employs more than 250 million people worldwide, most of them invisible to consumers, their labor abstracted into a price tag, their humanity erased by the distance between production and consumption. The cotton farmer in India struggling with debt. The textile worker in Bangladesh earning poverty wages in dangerous conditions. The child laborer in Uzbekistan forced into the fields during harvest. All invisible, all forgotten, all sacrificed to the god of cheap clothing. And still, cotton shapes your life in ways you barely notice or think about. You wake in cotton sheets, soft and comfortable. You dry yourself with a cotton towel after showering. You dress in cotton clothes that feel good against your skin. You handle cotton paper, though you call it that only because it once was made from cotton rags before wood pulp became cheaper. You use cotton in medical supplies that save lives, in coffee filters, in 1,000 products so common you never think about their origin or history. Cotton is everywhere, ubiquitous, essential, and utterly invisible. But cotton's dominance comes at environmental costs beyond human exploitation. The ecological toll is staggering when honestly calculated. Cotton is a thirsty crop, requiring enormous quantities of water to grow properly. In some regions, entire rivers are drained dry to irrigate cotton fields, leaving nothing for wildlife or downstream communities. The Aral Sea in Central Asia, once the fourth largest lake in the world, has shrunk to a fraction of its former size, mostly disappeared because the rivers that fed it were diverted to water cotton in Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan. An entire ecosystem destroyed for fiber. Fishing villages now sit miles from water. Ships rust in former seabed now turn to toxic dust. Cotton is also chemical intensive beyond almost any other crop. Modern industrial cotton farming relies heavily on pesticides to control the many insects that attack cotton and on fertilizers to maintain yields in exhausted soil. These are toxic substances that poison soil, water, and the farmers who apply them, causing cancers and birth defects and environmental damage. Cotton fields, though they cover only about 2.5% of global agricultural land, consume approximately 16% of the world's pesticides. The chemicals run off into waterways during rains, killing fish, contaminating drinking water, creating dead zones where nothing can live. The soil itself degrades, losing fertility, losing structure, requiring ever more chemical inputs to maintain yields. The system is not sustainable, but it continues because the demand continues, because we want cheap cotton clothing, because the true costs are hidden or deliberately ignored. And then there is the waste, the mountains of discarded clothing that grow every year. Fast fashion, enabled by cheap cotton and cheaper labor, produces billions of garments annually, most of which will be worn only a handful of times before being discarded. The average American throws away about 81 pounds of clothing per year, much of it cotton. Landfills overflow with cotton clothing, fabric that could last for years or decades, but is treated as disposable, as worthless after a single season. The environmental footprint of a single cotton t-shirt, from cultivation to dyeing to shipping to eventual disposal, is enormous when honestly calculated. More water than you drink in 2.5 years. Chemicals that will persist in the environment for decades. Carbon emissions from manufacturing and transportation. All for a garment that costs less than a meal and will be forgotten within a season or two. But there is hope, perhaps, if we choose to see it and act on it. Organic cotton, grown without synthetic pesticides or fertilizers, represents a small but slowly growing share of production. Farmers who switch to organic methods report healthier soil over time, cleaner water, better working conditions, fewer health problems. The yields may be lower initially, but the long-term sustainability is higher, the environmental impact lower, the farmer health better. Fair trade cotton attempts to ensure that farmers receive decent wages, that workers have safe conditions, that the exploitation built into the cotton economy can be challenged and changed, even if only incrementally and imperfectly. And people are beginning to pay attention, to wake up, to ask questions. To ask where their clothing comes from, who made it, under what conditions, at what cost. To choose quality over quantity when possible, durability over disposability. To recognize that cheap cotton clothing is cheap because someone somewhere is paying the real cost that does not appear on the price tag. The worker in Bangladesh earning dollars per day. The farmer in India facing crushing debt and despair. The river in Uzbekistan that no longer flows. The soil in Texas exhausted by decades of monoculture and chemicals. You stand now in a cotton field, if you choose to visit one, if you seek to understand the origins of what you wear. The plants stretch before you in endless rows, precisely spaced, their white bowls bursting open like stars scattered across green earth. The beauty is undeniable, the softness still remarkable after all these millennia, still wonderful to touch. You reach out and pluck a tuft of cotton, rolling it between your fingers thoughtfully, feeling the same softness your ancestors felt when they first discovered this plant, this fiber, this possibility that would change everything. And you understand, finally and fully, what cotton represents. Not just a crop or a commodity or a garment hanging in your closet. but a complete story of human ingenuity and human cruelty, of innovation and exploitation, of comfort built on suffering. Cotton clothed the world, and in doing so, revealed everything we are capable of, both magnificent and monstrous, both beautiful and terrible. The soft white fiber holds all of human history in its strands if you know how to read it. Every thread spun from cotton carries the labor of countless hands, the sweat of countless brows, the hopes and suffering of countless lives lived and lost in service to this plant. When you wear cotton, you wear that history, whether you know it or not, whether you acknowledge it or not. You are connected through fabric to the farmer in the field, to the worker at the loom, to the child picking by hand, to the enslaved person who died in the American South, to the industrial worker who coughed out their lungs in a Manchester mill. Cotton connects us all across time and space, across continents and centuries, through the most intimate act of daily life, clothing our vulnerable bodies. And in that connection lies both the problem and the possibility. Because if we are connected, we bear responsibility. If the cotton we wear is produced through exploitation, we are part of that system, complicit in it. But if we demand better, if we choose differently, if we recognize the humanity in every hand that touched the cotton before it reached our skin, then change becomes possible. Difficult but possible. The soft white fiber still grows today, patient and persistent as always. The plants still flower and form bowls and burst open in the sun. Cotton still clothes billions of people, still shapes economies, still drives trade. The empire of cotton has not fallen, has not collapsed, but it can be transformed. It must be transformed if we are to honor the labor that built it, if we are to repair the damage it has caused, if we are to create a future where clothing the world does not require destroying it, where comfort does not demand cruelty, where the soft fiber brings dignity rather than degradation to all who touch it. You are part of that story now, whether you realize it or not. Every choice you make about cotton, about clothing, about consumption and waste and care, writes the next chapter in this ancient narrative. The fiber that changed the world is still changing it, still shaping it, still connecting us all in ways both visible and invisible, obvious and hidden. And the question now, the question that matters more than any other, is simple in its asking but complex in its answering. What will you do with that connection? How will you honor the hands that grew and picked and spun and wove the cotton that covers your body right now? How will you ensure that the empire of cotton becomes, finally, something truly worth wearing, something we can be proud of rather than ashamed of? The answers are not easy. They require sacrifice, require paying more for clothing that is fairly made, require buying less and choosing better, require thinking about consequences rather than just convenience. They require seeing the invisible people who make your clothes, acknowledging their humanity, demanding their dignity. They require accepting that cheap has a cost someone else is paying. They require caring about people you will never meet, about rivers you will never see, about soil you will never touch. But the alternative is to continue as we are, to let the empire of cotton persist in its current form, extracting profit from suffering, destroying environments for temporary fashion, treating people and planet as disposable resources rather than sacred trusts. And that alternative is not sustainable, not morally, not environmentally, not economically in the long term. The cotton plant does not care about any of this, of course. It simply grows where conditions allow, produces its fiber season after season, offers its gift without judgment. The plant is neutral, innocent, neither good nor evil. It is what we make of it that matters. It is what we do with its fiber that determines whether cotton is blessing or curse, liberation or oppression, comfort or cruelty. You hold that choice in your hands every time you shop for clothing, every time you decide what to keep and what to discard, every time you wash or mend or donate or throw away cotton fabric. Your individual choices may seem insignificant, too small to matter in a global industry worth hundreds of billions of dollars. But choices accumulate. Individual actions compound. Millions of people making slightly different choices can shift entire systems, can force industries to respond, can create the change that seems impossible when viewed from the perspective of a single person. And beyond individual choice lies collective action, political pressure, regulation and law, international agreements and enforcement. The empire of cotton did not arise through natural law or divine mandate. It was built by human choices and can be rebuilt differently by different choices. Labor laws can protect workers. Environmental regulations can reduce pollution. Trade policies can ensure fairness. Consumer pressure can demand transparency. None of this is easy or automatic, but all of it is possible if enough people care enough to push for change. The soft white fiber waits for your answer, for humanity's answer. Just as it waited millennia ago for your ancestors to discover it and understand its potential, to see possibility in a plant. Just as it has waited through centuries of cultivation and exploitation, through slavery and industrial revolution, through environmental destruction and fast fashion. It waits now in fields across the globe for you to see it clearly, fully, honestly. To see not just the softness but the system that produces it. Not just the comfort but the cost extracted from workers and environments. Not just the fabric but the future it represents. Cotton clothed the world, transformed human civilization, made comfort accessible to billions. It gave us beauty and art, protected us from elements, allowed us to express identity and culture through what we wear. These gifts are real and should be honored. But cotton also enslaved millions, exploited countless workers, destroyed ecosystems, created waste on scales previously unimaginable. These harms are equally real and must be acknowledged, confronted, corrected. The plant itself is innocent. The fiber is merely fiber, neither good nor evil. But the systems we built around cotton, the choices we made and continue to make about how to grow it and process it and sell it and wear it, these are not innocent. These are human choices with human consequences. And humans can choose differently. You can choose to learn where your cotton comes from, to seek out fairly made clothing even when it costs more, to buy less but better quality that lasts, to care for what you own so it serves you longer, to mend rather than discard, to donate rather than trash, to demand transparency and fairness from the brands you support. These choices matter. They accumulate. They create change. You can choose to see the people behind your clothing, to remember that every garment was touched by human hands, created through human labor, represents human time and skill and effort. You can choose to value that labor, to honor that humanity, to demand dignity for all workers in the cotton chain from field to factory to store. You can choose to care about the environmental cost, to recognize that cotton grown unsustainably damages soil and water for generations, that pesticides poison ecosystems, that waste accumulates in landfills and oceans. You can choose to support organic farming, sustainable practices, circular economy approaches that minimize waste. These choices are not easy. They cost more money, more time, more thought and care. They require swimming against the current of convenience and cheap prices. They require seeing what most people prefer to ignore, caring about what most people find it easier to forget. But they are the choices that honor the gift of cotton while rejecting the systems of exploitation that have surrounded it. The empire of cotton will not fall overnight. Systems this vast, this entrenched, this profitable to those who control them do not transform quickly or easily. But they can transform. History proves that. Slavery ended. Child labor was restricted. Worker protections were established. Environmental regulations were passed. None of these changes happened automatically or easily. All required sustained effort by people who cared enough to fight for change despite opposition and setbacks. The same can happen for cotton, is happening slowly, incompletely, but undeniably. Organic cotton grows as a percentage of total production. Fair trade certification expands. Transparency increases as consumers demand to know where their clothing comes from. Brands respond to pressure by improving conditions, reducing environmental impact, ensuring fair wages. The change is too slow, too incomplete, too unevenly distributed. But it is happening, and it can accelerate if more people care, if more voices demand better, if more choices reflect values rather than just convenience. You are standing at a crossroads that your ancestors could never have imagined. They picked cotton by hand, processed it with simple tools, wove it on basic looms, wore garments that represented weeks or months of labor. Cotton was precious because labor was visible, because every thread represented human effort, because nothing was wasted or taken for granted. You live in an age of abundance they could not have dreamed of, where cotton clothing is so cheap it is effectively disposable, where closets overflow with more garments than can be worn, where fashion changes faster than seasons. This abundance is built on the accumulated innovations of 10,000 years, on the labor of billions of people across centuries, on the domestication and improvement of a plant that offered its soft fiber freely. But abundance without gratitude is waste. Convenience without conscience is exploitation. Comfort purchased through others' suffering is not truly comfortable at all, not when honestly examined, not when the costs are acknowledged rather than hidden. So the choice before you is clear, even if acting on it is difficult. Will you continue to participate unconsciously in systems that exploit people and degrade environments? Or will you choose, imperfectly but intentionally, to honor the gift of cotton while rejecting the cruelty that has surrounded it? Will you see the cotton fiber for what it truly is? A miracle of coevolution between plant and human, a gift that has clothed civilizations, a soft white strand that connects you to 10,000 years of human history and to millions of people alive today whose labor makes your comfort possible? The soft white fiber waits in fields across the world, patient as always, persistent as always, offering its gift as it has for millennia. What we make of that gift, how we honor it, how we ensure that the comfort it provides does not require the suffering of those who produce it, that is entirely up to us. Cotton clothed the world. Now it is time to ensure that clothing the world does not destroy it or the people who make it possible. The choice, like the fiber itself, is in your hands. What you do with it will determine whether cotton's next chapter is one of continued exploitation or genuine transformation, whether the empire of cotton becomes something to be ashamed of or something to be proud of. The plant grows. The fiber waits. The choice is yours.